Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Emma Steele, and I'm the Knowledge Exchange Manager for the Midlands, for the East Midlands, as well as being part of the team delivering Maternal Matters, which is the reason we have this webinar tonight. So I'm joined by Dr. Colin Byrne, who is a beef research scientist, and Michael McManus, who is the beef technologist from Teagasc. And Teagasc are the body providing research, advice and training to the agricultural and food industries in Ireland. And they're with us tonight to share how they identify their superior cows to breed female replacements from for our future herd success. So just to cover then that this webinar will be recorded, you'll be able to access it afterwards and it will be available on YouTube. You will be muted throughout, but I would encourage you to ask questions as they pop into your head. We'll save them for the end, but if you write them in as we go through, then we'll be able to pull them through as we're going, and I'll read them out. As Colin has just changed the screen, this is how you ask questions. So if you click on the little orange arrow, that will pop out the questions box and you can type your question in there and click send, and that will come through to me. And as I say, I'll ask them at the end on your behalf, but please do type them in as we go, and we'll finish promptly, or we'll aim to finish promptly by 8 o'clock. Other than that, enjoy the webinar, and I'll pass over to you, Colin.
Okay, thanks, Emma. So first of all, thanks to Emma and AHDB for inviting myself and Michael to talk this evening. So as Emma said, I'm going to just talk through how we identify the superior cows at the herds here at Teagasc Grange. So I suppose just briefly the overview of what I'm going to go through this evening. So I suppose just by way of some background, I'll talk a little bit about the livestock research in Ireland, focusing on Grange, where we're coming from this evening. Also give a brief overview of the Irish beef suckling systems. And then we'll start to talk about, I suppose, the traits of a good suckler cow that fit into these systems. I suppose there's quite a large focus, and we've a good system here in Ireland for using genetics. So we'll talk about how we can use genetics to identify the cows that we can breed the replacements from. And I'll talk about the two suckler herds here in Grange, and we'll just take some examples of cows that we would identify as being suitable for breeding replacements. I suppose then also on that, I suppose in a more practical way, where you may not have, I suppose, a national body to work on data, just general data that can be collected on farm that's going to help you make decisions which cows you should breed from. And then finally, I'll touch on replacement strategy, so where we look at cow type that we use, either beef dairy cross cows versus beef bred suckler cows. So I suppose just firstly, we look at the livestock research that goes on in Ireland. So we're coming from Teagasc. I suppose Teagasc has four main livestock research centres, and each has its own, I suppose, area of research. The first being Athenry in the west in Galway, which focuses predominantly on sheep. Moore Park down the south in Cork, which focuses on dairy, pigs, I suppose from a livestock point of view. Johnstown Castle in Wexford then focuses on beef and dairy, and then here in Grange we focus on beef. And then also in that you'll see some of the other people that we work with in UCD and the University of Limerick, and then down the bottom in Bandon in County Cork, the ICBF, for the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, and I'll speak about those a little bit. This is the body that I suppose looks after and maintains our database for genetics. Also in Northern Ireland, I suppose we have AHDB, who have quite a large centre in Hillsborough in County Down, and then CAFRA also have Greenmount, as well as a couple of other farms in Northern Ireland. So just if we focus on Grange a little bit more, so the Grange Centre is 250 hectares of all grassland. We've housing for 1,100 animals, and then we can individually feed record intakes on 300 animals. There's also fairly extensive laboratory facilities that cover forage, animal tissue, as well as molecular biology. So these, I suppose, help support the research program. There's a couple of different departments, both animal bioscience and also production. So there's 2 suckler herds in Grange, the first being the dairy pasture herd. So this is made up of 100 suckler cows, and this brings the animals from calf right through to beef. The cow type is made up of 50% Limousin Friesian and 50% then coming from the suckler herd, either beef or Limousin sired cows. As I said, it's calf to beef, so the heifers are normally finished around 20 months of age and the steers at around 22 months of age. Then there's the maternal herd, or the replacement index herd. So this is made up of a 90 suckler cow using a calf to weaning system. And a third of these cows are of average genetic merit being sourced from the suckler herd, another third being high genetic merit sourced from the suckler herd, and the final third being high genetic merit sourced from the dairy herd. And then within these groups, the cows are predominantly sired by either a Limousin, an Angus, or a Simmental sire. So then if we just look at, I suppose, the Irish suckler beef systems, and we just look at the industry as a glance, just for some context. So we're the 5th largest beef exporter in the world, with product valued at approximately 2.5 billion. There's 940,000 suckler cows, so I suppose this is in decline at the minute. It was up over 1 million a number of years ago. We have a high reliance on exporting our beef products, with 90% of these exported. So I suppose producing high quality premium beef is very important. When we look at the systems then, so we're a grass-based system. Cows will normally calf somewhere between February and April. Cows and calves will then spend the first grazing season together, and then the calves will be weaned in the autumn time. And then I suppose if you're in a calf to weaning system, this is where your weaning will be sold. And then if you're in a calf to beef system, you'll house these animals and they'll undergo a store period before going back out to grass. From here then, these animals will either be finished off grass with or without meal, or they'll be housed and they'll be finished on some concentrate and grass silage. Or in another, I suppose, extended system, they can be stored again, and they go back out for a 3rd season at grass. And from here then, they'll either be finished with or without meal at grass. So as I've mentioned, as I said, grass, mentioned the word quite a lot, and somewhere between 60 and 80% of their total lifetime growth comes from grazing grass. So obviously grass being central to nearly all the systems that we have. So I suppose then we start to look at what is the good suckler cow that works in this system. So she's going to need to utilize grass efficiently. Okay, and central to this is lining up our, I suppose, calving season with the grass growing season. So fertility is critical to this. So I suppose one of our key performance indicators is that we have a compact early spring calving. So you want a good 6-week calving rate from these cows. So we'd be aiming to have 80% of our cows calved in the first 6 weeks. This is going to be important, I suppose. So you can see here where we want to maximize the amount of green that is available to the cows once they've calved to eat. So if we've calving around here, we can see we're going to maximize the amount of grass, whereas if it moves, then we're going to have less grazed grass, more silage, and that will produce more slurry. And you can see here where more of the slurry and silage starts to take up, or sorry, silage starts to take up the kg of dry matter per day. I suppose then from a management issue, if you're in a calf to weaning system, you're going to have lighter weanlings if you're weaning at a certain age, as they won't be as well grown. So overall, your compact and early where possible calving is just going to simplify your overall production system. It's definitely going to increase your grass utilization, improve your herd health. You'll have more efficient use of your labour. And then there's some work from Paul Crossan and Mark McGee here at Grange that show it's also more profitable to calve earlier. Again, we just look at this and how calving days can affect profitability and specifically net margin. So you can see here where we have a net margin of just under €3,000. And then by moving to an earlier calving, you can see this increases dramatically. Okay, and this as a whole system is just going to improve the amount of grass in the diet, the overall ease of management, and better use of labour on the farm. I suppose another very important trait in the suckler cow is her age at first calving. Okay, so we aim for 24 months being some of the optimum, and I'm going to talk about some of the factors affecting that and what we need to do to target calving at 24 months of age. So we just look at, I suppose, some of the reasons why we would do it, and this is probably one of the more obvious one. So again, this is work by the same authors as the previous work where they compared calving at 24 months of age versus calving at 36 months of age. So we can see here calving at 36 or 3 years of age, those heifers ate 65% more grass, 96% more grass silage, and 33% more concentrates. And all the while you have to remember that this is an animal that's a year less productive than if she had calved at 24 months of age. So obviously if you can get her to calve earlier, and if she eats that, she's going to lower her maintenance costs and obviously improve her lifetime performance. So then if we just go through, I suppose, what I'm going to speak about for the next few minutes, and these are what we kind of look at as, I suppose, the 3 simple rules of identifying cows that we should breed our replacements from, and then if we have a group of heifers, which of those replacements get to the final stage of actually being bred. So first of all, we've visual assessment, so docility. If you're looking at the cow, obviously you want a cow that's as quiet as possible from both a health and safety point of view, but also, I suppose, from a labour. If you've animals that are quieter, it's going to take you less time to do things, and your labour efficiency is going to be much better. Functionality, again, this applies to both cow and heifer. You want good feet, good legs. That's going to, I suppose, last as long as she possibly can in the herd without having too many lameness issues. I suppose when you're selecting heifers, they might not be fully developed, so it's also important to keep an eye on the cow that she came from. So first of all, you'll select your cow, then you'll get your heifer. And if you're not happy that she's fully developed, you just make sure that she was one of the good functional cows that she came from. Then I suppose also weight for age targets. So I suppose this applies to heifers, and I'm going to speak the next few slides about the importance of this. So we've average daily gain targets, and I suppose growing as well as they can from a young age is going to reduce their age at puberty, which you'll see in a little bit, improves the chances of that heifer going a calf, good weaning weight, and then by 15 months or at breeding, you want that heifer to be 60% of her mature body weight. And then I suppose the third tool that we can use are genetic indexes. So here we use Eurostar indexes, specifically the replacement index. I suppose just involved in this, then we look at the reliability of the values of the indexes, and then I'll also go to speak about, I suppose, a balanced index. So you can get to a high number a number of different ways, and I suppose it's important to kind of look under the bonnet a little bit rather than just take the final value. So I suppose one of the things, and this I suppose comes under the aiming to calve down at 24 months of age, and also the weight for age targets. So puberty, obviously, heifer needs to be pubertal before she can go and calf. There's a number of different factors that are going to affect the age of puberty in these animals. So breed being one, where you have early versus late maturing animals. The early ones will be pubertal younger. Plane of nutrition, so this is coming back very much to your average daily gain targets and your weight for age targets. Heterosis, where you, I suppose, get the benefits of crossing maybe an early versus a late maturing breed. And then there's also some evidence, maybe inconsistent, that bull effect can reduce the age of puberty. It is a moderately heritable trait, so we can select for it, and I'll talk about in our index. I suppose the best way we have of selection for it is age at first calving. One thing that I suppose just want to point out about the importance or the usefulness of age at first calving, and this comes down to the timing of actual calving. So the top continuous line with the squares here is at our heifers that calved in the first 3 weeks of the calving season, and the bottom one are after 3 weeks. So you can see here that if we move out to their fourth calving season, that only about 25% of heifers have survived to the fourth calving season if they're calving later in the season. Okay, whereas if you can get heifers calving in the first 3 weeks, they have a much better chance of having greater longevity in the herd. So I'm just talking about some work that was carried out here in Grange a couple of years ago now, looking at the effect of breed type and plane of nutrition on puberty and fertility in heifers. So there was 320 heifers used in this study. They were sourced from either the suckler herd or the dairy herd, and then within that they were late maturing versus early maturing. So this was either limousine bred or AA or Aberdeen Angus. And then within that again, there was also plane of nutrition. So animals that were on ad lib concentrates to grow at 1.2 kg or greater per day, or animals that were on a lower moderate level of concentrates, 1.5, to grow about 0.5, 0.6 kg per day. So if we just look at these animals, and I suppose the main point from this is just to point out that having heifers pubertal at the beginning of your breeding season increases your pregnancy rate earlier in the breeding season. So you can see between 6, 8, and 10 weeks of the breeding season, there's a 12 to 13 point difference. So 13% more heifers are going to calf if they're pubertal at the beginning of that breeding season. So coming back to, I suppose, well-grown heifers having good early life growth are important for achieving puberty before the beginning of the breeding season. This work then, I suppose, while it was ongoing, this work from a US group came out, which also supported the findings of the work that was carried out here. So then if we just look at, I suppose, the main results from this, the heifers from the sourced from the dairy herd had a higher pregnancy rate at 6 and 12 weeks of the breeding season. The early maturing sired heifers had a higher 6-week pregnancy rate than the later maturing heifers, although by the 12th week of the breeding season, this difference was gone. And the heifers that were offered an ad libitum concentrates were pubertal 2 weeks earlier than those that were offered the moderate amount of concentrates, and there was no difference in the final pregnancy rate of these animals. So those were heifers that started those differential diets at around 8 months of age. So I suppose I spoke earlier on about early life nutrition, and we get a little bit of a better response if we can start the improved growth in these animals at a younger age. So this was, I suppose, a follow-up study to the previous one, where these were Angus only heifers sourced from the dairy herd. So from 4.5 to 9 months of age, they were offered either a high plain nutrition, which was again ad libitum concentrates, versus a moderate, which was 1 to 1.5. So similar growth rates as before, at 1.2 versus about 0.5, 0.6 kg per day. Then at the beginning of this graph, that I suppose is that when they were 9 months of age, they were all offered the exact same plain of nutrition. So you can see here at the beginning, the animals that were better fed from younger age, already 30% of those were pubertal, versus a much lower proportion when they were offered a moderate diet. And this, although they were on the same diet, this stayed true right until they were turned out the following spring. And then I suppose at 450 days of age, so this is 15 months of age, and this is when these heifers need to be going to calf if you want them to calve down at 24 months of age. And you can see, I suppose, that the proportion that was pubertal was still much greater in the animals that were that had been offered the better plain nutrition, obviously, and this linked with their better growth rates at the time. So then, just following up from that, we start just having a look at, I suppose, identifying suitable replacement heifers and also cows that we would consider as suitable for breeding replacements from. So as I mentioned, when I had the map of Ireland up, we have the ICBF, or the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, here in Ireland. So this company basically collates all this data and forms this database, and then I suppose maintains it. And from this, then they're able to produce the breeding values for the different traits, or for the different animals, and from that, then we get our indexes. So we have a number of different indexes here in Ireland. So you can see it's quite a large, diverse group of companies and institutions that feed into this, to make it quite a large database. So from this, then, as I said, we can produce indexes. So I suppose the one of most relevance this evening and what we're talking about is the replacement index. So this is made up of these traits, with 71% of them being related to the cow, and 29% of them being related to the progeny of that cow. So essentially, the replacement index is going to estimate the suitability of an animal's daughter for these specific traits, and then the calf traits are the progeny of that, of the offspring of that animal. So you will get a replacement index value, which I'll talk about in a second, and then you'll also get your star rating. So 5 stars being where the index value is in the top 20% of the animals, and 1 star where the index is in the bottom 20% of the animals. And this, I suppose, in Ireland's case, is a crossbreed. So the index value will basically be calculated as, I suppose, the trait, the performance trait, and then multiplied by the emphasis that there is in that trait in the index by the economic weighting of that. So one other thing, I suppose, that we can use ICBF for, and one of the outputs that we can get, are individual animal reports. So I think this is still relevant even if you don't have an ICBF. It's still data that can be recorded on farm, important traits that I suppose farmers should be recording so that they can select cows, the better cows in their herd. So we see here, this is I suppose a reasonably old girl now, but she's got a replacement index value of 120. That makes her 5-star across breed. Her reliability, I suppose, in a beef context is reasonably good. But down here, I suppose we have the different traits of both herself and her offspring. I think that we would use to select whether this is the type of cow we would want another one of these in the herd. So you have calving details, and again, as I said, these are things that farmers can record. So calving interval, that this can be recorded by just diligently recording her calving date and her calving ease. So how easy it is, was there any issues, what happened at that time. The weanling performance, so there you're looking at weight, so recording weight, I suppose a minimum of 3 times if possible, to then get an average daily gain. And then your carcass performance, so this is data that will be available to you from the abattoir after the animal's slaughtered. And then I suppose across these, you can basically decide or rank these animals where they're performing in your herd. So the previous cow ranked quite well, I suppose, across breed. She was 5-star, and she had a reasonably good replacement index value. But as I said earlier, talking about balanced indexes, it's important that you look at more than just the end value. Okay, so we can see here these are 2 5-star animals, but they've got there in, I suppose, different ways. So the top cow has a very, very good replacement value, but you can see that it's driven by almost just these traits and this, and she's contributing very little to carcass weight. Whereas the bottom cow is has much more balanced traits across these 3 traits. So it's just, I suppose, it's important, if you had to make the decision between which one of these 2 would you use to breed a replacement, you'd probably be leaning towards the bottom cow. Again, here, these are 2 heifers that you would say are probably a little bit more suited to breeding replacements from. In particular, the bottom animal, where she is quite balanced and quite good across all these different traits. So then, just briefly looking at, I suppose, the effect of replacement strategy on cow and calf performance. So this was work, again, that was carried out here in Grange a couple of years ago, where they basically looked at the effect of replacement strategy. So ultimately, it's animals that came from the beef herd, where greater than 40% of their total breed faction was from beef animals, and dairy cross cows, so 40 to 50% being of the breed being of dairy. So you can just see here some of the traits that they looked at in this. So you can see here there was, I suppose, a significant but small difference in the age of first calving, in the beef sourced animals were slightly older. Calving interval, there was no, I suppose, real practical difference in this, and the same with the calving difficulty. So I suppose very little practical difference between these. Then when we look at the progeny performance, we can see here that progeny from cows that had been sourced from the dairy herd were 18 kg heavier at weaning. But the beef animals, when they were valued a little bit higher. Then on carcass performance, so the carcass of the progeny from animals sourced from the dairy herd were 8 kg heavier, but despite that, then the animals from the beef cows, or the cows sourced from the suckler herd, were still valued slightly higher. So this was a fairly detailed comparison, I suppose, of the performance of the beef, performance of beef and beef dairy cross cows in a grass-based system. The weanlings were from the dairy cross cows were heavier. I suppose this is associated with greater milk production in these types of animals. They also have, I suppose, a greater propensity for grass dry matter intake. So I suppose these are just findings that are based from work, again, done at Grange. I haven't actually presented the data here this evening. Overall, the dairy cross animals did also had greater reproductive efficiency, and we saw some of that, although small differences in the 2 slides ago. But the beef cows did have, I suppose, greater cow survival, or they lasted longer in the herd, and I suppose their progeny and their own cull cow conformation was better, and hence why they got, I suppose, the greater value, although they were slightly lighter than the those sourced from the dairy animals. So I suppose just the thing on that then is that the system is going to be quite important, and when farmers are selecting their replacement strategy and where they want to source their animals from, their target market is probably what they do need to look for. So both cow types have good attributes, but I suppose the farmer needs to look at his own system and what suits him the best. So then, just to, I suppose, sum up, the fertility, the milk and the progeny performance are, I suppose, key factors to suckler cow efficiency. And the data collection is going to be very important to ensure the reliability of the specific traits. So basically, that if an animal is supposed to add a certain amount of gain in your herd, the more data is behind that, the better the reliability. I would say collect as much data collect data on as many traits that are feasible. Obviously, it's not going to be practical, or some people might not have the facilities in all cases to collect everything. But I suppose we do just look at some of the factors that can actually be carried out at farm level. So docility, obviously a farmer can recognise what is, I suppose, easy and not easy to work with, cows that are safe versus safer versus dangerous. Functionality, obviously, if you're unhappy or if a cow has persistent lameness issues, you know you're not going to try and breed any more of her. Weight, and this is probably a big one that's not carried out widely in Ireland anyway, is, I suppose, regular weight recording. There are a couple of schemes that have promoted it over the last number of years, but obviously it is very important from a weanling performance point of view, and as I said, the more data you have in this, the more reliable things are going to be. Time at calving, so as I said, this is a way of getting both your ensuring that your cows are meeting your 365-day calving interval targets. And then one of the slides I also mentioned that cows that heifers that calve in the first 3 weeks of the calving season are much more likely to last longer in the herd. So I suppose if you can record this, these are the types of animals, if they're ticking about their 365-day calving interval, calving earlier in the calving season, if you keep working on that, you'll get a cumulative gain in terms of reducing the spread of your calving. And also carcass characteristics. So as I said, these don't require a lot of recording, so they should be made available from the abattoir. So I would say obviously look at this and try to identify cows that produce superior carcasses, so then you can start moving towards those in terms of breeding replacements from them. So I suppose then, just in keeping with the summary, building a database, and if possible or where possible, selection index is going to act as a valuable tool for making your breeding decisions further on. And then, as I mentioned on the last point, your replacement strategy needs to be based on the farmer's system and what the farmer's end market is. So from that, you need clear breeding objectives, so that you'll know the cow type that's going to suit your system best. And that's all from me. So thanks, and we'll take questions now.
Thanks, Colin. That was great. Just while we're waiting for any last questions to come in, can we just skip through the next couple of slides, if that's possible, please? So I'd just like the opportunity, take the opportunity to highlight these resources here. They'll be sent round on an email after this webinar, and they're just resources that might help you with things that we've spoken about tonight. So one is the Maternal Matters web pages. One is the herd notebook, so you can scribble down a lot of those factors, a lot of those KPIs Colin mentioned tonight, and record them back to your cows. Colin's last point there was about having a real focus and breeding plan. So we have a suckler breeding plan that helps you kind of ask those questions and structure that so that you can make sure you're breeding the right replacements for you. I'd like to flag the AHDB Farm Business Review. So that is a one-to-one consultancy visit that is available until February time, but really get registered for that as soon as possible. The link will be in the follow-up email, and you can follow all the social media activity for Maternal Matters using the hashtag Maternal Matters. If you could just click onto the next one, please, Colin. And this is the last one, and then we'll just go to your questions because I can see them coming in quick and fast out the corner of my eye. So just to mention, if you have enjoyed this tonight and you'd like to have your say on how your levy is spent in the future, we have a vote coming up in the spring, so it'll be in April 2022, and that's your opportunity to talk about how you'd like us to spend your levy and the areas of work that we engage in. I would strongly encourage you to register for that vote, and registration opens tomorrow and will run to the end of March. So please just be aware of that, keep an eye out and register for it when it opens tomorrow. So Colin, just to go to some questions then. So the first one we've had through is about mature size, mature weight and weights. So I've been selecting replacement heifers on weaning weight amongst others. Now my mature weight of adults is increasing. How would I select for reducing cows' mature weight?
Yeah, so look, I suppose the thing about that is you're going to have to weigh your cows as well, and you're going to have to look at your cow efficiency. So one KPI that we would have on cow efficiency is that a cow should wean 50% of her own live weight. And so I suppose you need to kind of start looking at that. And I suppose maybe if you have cows that are extremely heavy, they may not, the weanlings are only going to get to a certain weaning weight, and that would be one way that I would say you could probably start looking at that if she's not weaning 50% of her own live weight, she's probably not one that you want to keep, or we wouldn't consider the most efficient animal.
Yeah, and just on that then, so you mentioned heifers being 60% of their mature weight at bulling. What's the mature weight at Grange, and is it where you want it to be?
Yeah, Michael can probably give you the specifics of that a bit better than I can. I can give you national stuff, no problem. You're on mute, Michael.
Oh no, you're still on mute, Michael. Oh, there we go.
So yeah, no, like at the heifers in Grange here, like we generally turn them out around, hoping to breed them around the 400 kilos. And then at the minute now, our replacement heifers will be calving down in February. They're around 580 kilos at the minute. So they calve down around the 600 kilos, thereabouts. Yeah, that answers the question.
Yeah, no, thank you. And coming back to what you were just saying, Colin, to answer that first question, chap's just come back and said he's doing this, but it's selected him for heavier cows still. Is there anything else he can do? Can he record the mature size of his cows and maybe put a downward pressure on that?
Yeah, exactly. I think he needs to start weighing maybe his cows as well, and kind of start looking for the lighter cows that are still probably weaning the heavier weanling.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And then we've got a question saying, how much more important is fertility compared to carcass?
Yeah, like I suppose that is quite a tricky one. Again, I suppose it depends on the system. Like if you don't have fertile cows, you won't have any calves or carcasses at the end. So I don't think I have an answer to say which is more important. You need both, you know, and I suppose if you're recording as many traits on both as you can, you should be able to improve the other improve one while maintaining the other, or at least not letting one go down while the other goes up.
That's for sure, yeah. If you start like with fertility first and get a good fertile herd in place to start with, then once you've got to a good high standard of fertility, you'll be able to work on the other traits, and you know they will come in time, you know. So you'll be able to, once you see that your fertility increasing, you'll be able to go maybe branch out and look at your carcass more intensely then.
Yeah. Okay, and a bit on that subject then, do you use previous calving records when you're choosing cows to breed replacements from? So if she's had a bad calving previously or anything like that, do you use that information?
So we let's say when we on the site on the herd here ourselves, we do purchase the heifers solely because of the research purposes. We need to keep the animals in the trial. But if a cow, let's say in her second year, if she's had difficulty at calving, whether it's, you know, is it maybe sometimes they put out a calf bed, we wouldn't be keeping them on. But in general, if a cow is given trouble, let's say practically in general, if she's putting out her calf bed or she's issues with her feet, I wouldn't be advising to keep on any of her heifers, you know. So generally wouldn't, no.
Okay, can you just repeat? Oh, sorry, Colin. Go on.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, you asked about previous records. Like on one of the slides I have now, I know it was a report that I had taken from our database, but like you can build up those, I suppose, individual animal reports yourself, where you can look back quite easily, and you can pick out if there was any major issues. Like that one I picked out was one that I would have said was a particularly nice, consistent cow. You know, she had easy calving. She was hitting her 365-day calving interval all the time. Her weanling growth rates were reasonably good, and most of the, I suppose, the carcass characteristics of her progeny were what we call in spec. So, you know, you can, those things I think are easy for farmers, that they can build up themselves, and they can go back and consult, even if it's just making the decision between the last couple of cows or not. They can, having that data there to consult is going to be very useful.
So is it about making more use of what you've possibly already got?
Yeah, and like I know one of the easiest ones is probably carcass, because I don't think, you know what I mean, it are carcass characteristics, because the abattoir should give you a kill sheet that has all that data on it, and so that data has basically been recorded with you. Now, as obviously one of the questions earlier on where they asked about the balance between fertility and carcass, you know, some of the fertility, the farmer will need to record that themselves.
Yeah. No, thank you. Michael, I know you've answered this already, but can you just repeat what your average mature cow weight is, please? Just as a few people missed that.
The average cow weight is around 660 kilos there. Yeah, that's over on the Derry Patrick herd.
Great, thank you. So the Derry Patrick herd, is that the dairy beef herd, or is that the beef herd? Sorry.
No, it's suckler beef herd. Derry Patrick is the name of the area we're in here. Yeah, it's a town land, so.
Yeah. Another question: what bull type would you recommend for first-time heifers? So like commercial or pedigree, or what kind of type would you be thinking?
Yeah, so I suppose on the herd I'm working on there at the minute, we're using Angus bulls, solely down to the trial that's going on. There's Charlie's, Limousine, and Cementals going on the cows, and then we're using Angus on the heifers, just solely to get in another breed on them. But I suppose it all come down to the calving difficulty of the bull, and we generally try and get it below 4% and have as high reliability as possible, because it's so important if you're going calving down at 24 months of age to have an easy calving, because that's what will depend if they stay in the herd. And I do find anyway, if they have difficulty calving the first year, they'll struggle to go back and calf, and in some cases, if it's a section, it might hold them. It might just hold them up for too long, and they might slip out that following year. So calving difficulty is the big one, and we were using Angus. Now, I'm not saying they're the best, but the main thing would be the calving difficulty to be low on whatever bull you choose.
So over here we have kind of two Calving Ease EBVs. We've got Calving Ease Direct and Calving Ease Daughters. Do you have that, or do you just have the one?
Yeah, no, we have both as well. Yeah, I suppose it's built into the replacement index.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we've got another one on mature cow weight. When do you measure your mature cow weights? Is it at weaning or pre-service?
So on the herd here, we're measuring the cow's body condition and cow weight once a month, and so we have a great idea over the whole year. But wouldn't be, I just take it. I wouldn't generally just take it maybe at the end of weaning or something like that. Yeah. So it's just maybe over the year. So I wouldn't personally take it on one particular time.
Okay,
one thing we do have is one of the schemes that I mentioned that is, I'm not sure if there's another iteration of it going to be, but it is recommended, or one of the weights is around weaning. So they want a cow weight and a calf weight at as close to weaning as possible. And it's I suppose it's an efficiency scheme, so it obviously includes that kind of suckler cow efficiency, and there's also environment tied into it, but that is I suppose the time that they focus on.
And is that the KPI, Colin, you were talking about, that you were aiming for 50%? Yeah. Okay. Another question: have you done any work on cow weaning efficiency, and have you come to any conclusions on optimum cow size with regards to farm performance over individual cow performance?
Simple answer is I don't know of any work that's been done.
Okay. So AHDB did a little bit of work, commissioned some work that Abacus Bio were involved in, looking at optimum mature size in both cattle and sheep. So that person, if you drop me an email or something afterwards, I'll make sure you get that. Brave question here: how much profit do you think we can hope to make on a cow, or per cow?
God, yeah. So how long is a piece of string, I suppose, isn't it? It's on the farmer's ability, and the land type, and how well the system is being ran, I suppose. So there's no real. Everybody is different. That's all I can say. Every farm is different. But
do you know what you're kind of aiming for, or is it slightly different with it being a university farm?
Yeah, exactly. Like, so we have a lot of overheads that maybe mightn't be occurred on your standard farm. Like, so that we wouldn't be we sort of looking at the output of the research more so than get down to the nitty gritty of the profits per year.
So this is the last time I'm going to ask it, and then Ian, stop asking the question. Are you making a profit? There you go, straight up.
Pardon? Straight home then. Yeah, no, there definitely would be a profit there at the minute in the Dairy Patrick herd. We have to look at this year's profit monitor and do the details up in it, but in previous years there has been, yeah.
I suppose, and the Dairy Patrick does run as a demonstration, like to demonstrate best practice, and Michael, it's fair to say that the technical efficiency of it is quite good. So, I mean, it is, yeah.
The person that's asking that question joins a lot of beef webinars, and his favourite thing to ask is whether people are making a profit. How many cows per man are you currently running?
I suppose that's something similar to the profit scenario. Like, we have at the minute, it'd be myself and farm staff on 100 cow herd, and then with some casual labour then at the time of calving, and there is a help available when we are doing trial work. So generally 1 farm staff at the minute for the 100 cow suckler herd, with some casual labour around breeding and calving.
Okay. And then another one on body condition score. Do you take body condition score into account when you're looking at weaning percentage? And I think he's talking about that KPI.
Suppose we don't, Michael. Would that be fair to say?
No.
Yeah,
No.
we don't. But no, that is a good question, and it would be something that would be good to include.
Okay, brilliant. And just a last one then, in case there's any more come in. In the UK from BCMS data, our current average age at first calving across the suckler herd is 32.8 months. Do you have a rough idea of what that would be in Ireland at all?
I think it's very, very similar. Around 32 months.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, we've got one more has just snuck in. Do you measure heifers' pelvic size before breeding?
No, we don't, but it's something I was thinking of maybe doing this year. We do pre-breeding scan on the heifers, and we find that that's good help. You know, it eradicates any heifers that might be cycling, and might have, you know, different any issues or free marking or anything like that. So it's just a pre-breeding check. But we haven't measured pelvic size, but it was something I was hoping to maybe start doing this year on.
No, that's great.
And it would be a good thing, I suppose, to include and come back to this kind of the 3 simple rules of a functional type of parameter that you'd look at. Pelvic width, I suppose, is something that you could probably include in that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, we'll let you get away, I think. Thank you very much for your time tonight, both Colin and Michael. That's been really interesting. And we've had lots of questions come through as well. Just to remind people, after this webinar closes, there'll be a feedback form. If you could please fill in the feedback survey, it helps us shape what we do in the future, and make sure we deliver the materials that you want and that you need. So if you could fill that in, please, that would be great. And then keep an eye out for that resources email that I mentioned, which will stick straight into your inbox, anything that could be helpful from tonight. Other than that, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.